Okay, so in English, our next speaker is one of those guys that have entire team trying to build the pink apps, to protect them, and after that, he just comes in and breaks everything. And this repeats over and over again. But his job is very important, as the penetration testing is one of the first activities you should do in your company if you are producing software. So our next speaker has experience since year 2010 in penetration testing. He has his own consultancy company. So please, your applause for Dimitar Shovarjiev.
Hi guys. I know we said that the talk is going to be in Bulgarian. Sorry for a little bit of blunder there. It's going to be in English because there are a lot of international guests and a lot of family as well in here. Let me just log myself out of here. So yeah, right. Unfortunately, I prepared the presentation in half Bulgarian. As you might know, technical Bulgarian is not really that rich. So I'm going to translate for the international guests. Anyhow, today we're going to talk about penetration testing for fools. Because every one of us is more or less a fool, and especially if it comes to security, to information security. Just a story of the last hour. I went to vote today. I hope you all do, because democracy is important and every vote counts. Anyhow, I went to vote, and as you might know, we are introducing machine voting in Bulgaria. So, to my great surprise, just against the machine, it wasn't like in a what they call white box. It was just a machine that had a large carton around it, which had to prevent, take care of your confidentiality, the confidentiality of your vote. So the school camera was looking directly at the terminal. So yeah, again, information security is important, and a lot of people say that security through obscurity is a good thing. I don't think so. I hope you have some takeaways from today's lecture, and especially for developers, especially for people who are new to the subject, it's going to be like intermediate level friendly, I would say. Right, a little bit about myself. I studied informatics at the Technical University of Sofia and the Technical University in Karlsruhe. After that, I finished my master's in business administration. I used to know a lot about networks, and I was triple CCNP certified. After that, I got trained in certified ethical hacking and CISSP, which are security certificates, which more or less coincided with my career, which started as what they used to call webmasters at a network company. After that, I became an information security officer at Hewlett-Packard for customers like Nokia and Ericsson and Philips. After that, I became a business consultant doing math models with a lot of sensitive data for customers like Philips and Pfizer. And after that, I started my own company, which deals with web development. So this is more or less what I'll be talking about today, pen testing for web applications. Now a few words about the Bermuda Triangle of security. As you might have seen those, you can pick two only. So it's going to be either expensive, it's going to be user-friendly, or it's going to be safe. So choose wisely. And the decision you are going to make is more or less going to be dependent on the business that you run. So yeah, a little bit of a spoiler here. I have a few memes in my presentation, which are very old jokes, not really funny. First of all, like I said, I studied a little bit in Germany. And second of all, if you think information security will be fun, you're in for a bad time. So yeah, next question I'm going to talk about is why it's important to be safe. The importance of safety is shown here in this diagram. I'm afraid it's not readable for you guys, so I'm going to spell some of things out. These are information security leaks, only web application information security leaks. Here we have Yahoo with 500 million, with a leak of 500 million username and passwords in 2000 and let me check, 2014. We have a MySpace leak of 104 million. We have a Brazzers leak that was earlier this year, which was like 80 million or something like that. Some of those you've heard a lot about. For example, here it says Ashley Madison. Sorry for the low res. I'm going to share my slides, and you can take a look at everything here. I mention my sources usually, so you can take a look at that and find out. So, what the information security guys do, the first step of a penetration test is reconnaissance. So, if I get contracted to pen test a company, the first thing to do would be to find out a way in. And a good way in is through some of those leaked accounts. Probably you have an account somewhere here. I mean, Contacte or Yahoo or MySpace or eBay. So chances are that your password was already leaked if you haven't changed your password, or if you use a password rotation. Then chances are that you are going to get hacked again through the well-known password. There are online portals that show you whether your account was leaked or not. But the main takeaway from this slide here is that you're not safe. You shouldn't rely on the fact that any of your information is safe. So you should always look around for vulnerabilities. You need to secure your stuff. Here, that's an IBM X-Force report. Even though it should be confidential, it was leaked some time ago. So again, if you try to make an information security report confidential and it's getting leaked, then you're not really doing a good job. It was leaked, by the way, from the IBM site, where it wasn't secured by any means of authentication or authorization mechanisms. So yeah, anyhow, back to the report. As you can see here, the different bubbles signify different impact monetarily, as well as by accounts. And the different colors at the here signify what type of attack it was. So here we have brute force, watering hole, physical access, phishing, SQL injection, sorry, malvertising, so some sort of a clickbait or advertisement that leaks malware to your PC, misconfiguration, denial of service attack, distributed denial of service attacks, or just malware. This here is undisclosed. So as you can see, this is, by the way, 2015. Here are the months of 2015. A pretty simple analysis would show that most of the hacks are due to misconfiguration or denial of service attacks. So a lot of applications have very good security mechanisms, but they're misconfigured. So a penetration test would usually find out about those misconfigurations and would allow you to fix them, because they're really a configuration file. You shouldn't code. It's very low expense, but you're getting higher and higher up the value chain, so you're not the low-hanging fruit of the information security world. Right. What comes next? We are going to talk about security breaches. And who said web? 35%, the largest amount of security breaches comes through web. This is, by the way, again, statistics here are not that important. The important thing is that a lot, like more than a third of the security breaches come from the web. So they don't come from dedicated applications. They don't come from your somehow. They are connected to your email usually, but they are not directly mail vulnerabilities or something like that. And why would that be? Because it's really easy. Usually, your local area network sits behind 2 firewalls, and your demilitarized zone with your web service sits just behind 1. So it's easier access. It's pretty straightforward. You can see that here. And here, I've done a lot, some statistics of my own. I've taken this data and analyzed it a little bit more. First of all, I filtered only the web breaches. And the first chart here shows the number of records, total number of records stolen from each organization. By the way, this report is from the beginning of 2015, sorry. So this report is from the beginning of 2015, and that's why the 2015 number, which is the green bar, is so low. So we are going to consider 2010 to 2014 only. Another thing that the data set provided was sensitivity. I altered it a little bit because it had varying weights. So I'm using the following sensitivities. Email address or online information that is easily accessible comes with a 1. Social security numbers or personal details have a weight of 2. Credit card information a 3. Email passwords or health records, etc., have a severity of 4, and then full bank account data has a 5. So as you can see here, even though the number has risen, the severity hasn't lowered. So a lot of people think that, yeah, there are a lot of breaches, but the breach is of non-critical information, or somehow the sensitivity of the data that's been breached isn't that high. Well, this shows that actually it's fairly constant, and it revolves around 3, which is credit card information level of data breach. And here I came up with my metric of sensitivity loss, which is really basic. It's number of records stolen times the sensitivity of leaks. So I take each leak, I analyze what the sensitivity of the leak was, and then the number of records stolen. And here you can see that actually the sensitivity lost is going up as well. So yeah. How would a penetration test help? So first of all, and most important of all, it creates conditions of a real life threat. Usually, if you build web applications or you run a company, you think that you're prepared for a full-out attack on your infrastructure through trainings or through general knowledge of how an attack would work. And there are a lot of considerations in place, but then you get the chance to test your team. Usually, a penetration test consists of 3 teams. One of certified ethical hackers, or techs, or whatever, white hats, so-called white hats, which is called the red team, which tries to penetrate your application or your network. Then you have the blue team, which is your own team, which tries to defend it. And then you have a purple team, which is actually a mix of both ethical hackers and your team, which actually explain to each other what's going on. So what does the red team do, and then how does the blue team respond? So again, this is some sort of a realistic threat. It tests the system for answers, and it allows your team to switch roles with the bad guys. And this is very important because usually the bad guys don't oblige by the rules. So you get to be the bad guys. You get to check the not so sugar-coated mirror image of your application. You try to get in. And then it also, a penetration test also works as a training, and it passes the knowledge that to the whole team that you shouldn't be the weakest link, you should secure all your points, and you shouldn't be low-hanging fruit out there. So what are the types of penetration tests? You have 3 types of penetration tests, as you had 3 teams. One is black box, the other one is white box, and the third one is gray box. The difference between them is whether or not you give access to the penetration testers to any knowledge of your network. The black box testing gives no knowledge whatsoever, so they have to find everything by themselves. The white box gives full access to all details of how the infrastructure is built, to the whole code base, and so on and so forth. And they're really able to check all your API endpoints or whatever you have in there for any potential or already verified vulnerabilities. Gray box is somewhere in the middle. It's like a hybrid approach, which tries to maximize the plus sides of black box and white box, and tries to eliminate the disadvantages. The disadvantages of black box, by the way, is that it's really, really slow, because nobody, like the hackers, need to find out a lot of information about you. And then you really need to find really good black box testers, because otherwise they'll tell you that you're safe and you wouldn't be. With white box testing, it's rather slow, but way quicker than black box pen testing. But then you need to have full trust of the testing party, because obviously they have the keys to your castle. Talking about effectiveness, as you might presume, black box testing has a very low percentage of actual threats found, but it's also rather cheap. So you could also hire freelancers and just ask them to pen test you. Then gray box goes a wide way in the expense tab, but you'll be able to find up to 45% of your vulnerabilities or issues. Now, the types of penetration tests, but this was just theoretical types, and these are the more practical types of pen tests. We have network attacks over here, which are split into exploitations and attacks. So exploitations, you can think about it as vulnerabilities of the hardware or the operating system, and then attacks. Let's simplify it and think about it as a DDoS attack. So any sort of actually denial of service attack, it shouldn't be distributed. So the exploitations usually manipulate the confidentiality or integrity of your data, and the attacks eliminate the availability of data. So network attacks would be attacks against the firewall, the intrusion prevention systems, DNS attacks, and other non-web application attacks. We have the client-side applications, pen testing. We have the configuration pen testing. The social engineering. Social engineering pen testing, where you test your team. You test their knowledge in the security domain, for example, against phishing attacks, or whether they dump whether they recycle, for example, papers or invoices properly. You try to imposter, and then you also have a very nice type of attack, which is called threats. For example, you might have an alcoholic on your team, and he might get threatened to share some details about your infrastructure or application or whatever, or to leak some data. And then you have the web applications. Today we are going to talk about mostly network attacks and web applications. Here's our plan. So first of all, here's the plan of how a information security structured process should look like. So first you have the secure coding, which is actually the most important one. Because if you don't code securely, then the costs for a penetration test, for the whole penetration test framework would be extremely high, because you have a lot of vulnerabilities to fix over the time. After that, you have the secure server, you have the secure infrastructure. So first of all, you secure your application by coding it, obviously. After that, you have to secure your server. Then you have to secure the infrastructure and all the network devices, etc., the whole environment. And then you go on and perform an internal audit, which is also in scope of today's presentation, a bit in short. And then you get the external audit, where you actually pay external people to check the infrastructure and the applications that you have created. Now, as you might know, information security is not a one-time process. Pen testing is not a one-time process. So you need to have continuous compliance. So you need to continuously check whether you're secure or not, you're safe or not. Now let's look at more theory. You have your web application, you have input and you have output. So obviously, the ways to leak information is either through some sort of malformed input or through information leakage in the output. You might have heard of the OWASP framework. They collect the top 10 usual issues of web applications. And we are going to talk about them, but we are going to talk about a little bit more than that. Here's our internal checklist of what we usually check when deploying an application. Here you can see the top 15. The top 15 vulnerabilities by a German consultancy called SecConsult. Here are the OWASP 10 are shown with this, and these are what we found in both databases. So basically, we just use around 20. We check for around 20 of the most common vulnerabilities. I wouldn't go into much detail. We are getting a little bit pressed by time. I'd like to show you some things, but basically the takeaway from here is that if you sanitize your, if you validate your input and then you sanitize your output, you're going to be safe from most of. You've seen this, I believe. So if you input, if you check your input and check your output, you're going to be safe from all of the colored ones, and then you have the error handling, auditing, and logging to check, and you have to check for security misconfigurations, which are not small feats in themselves. But again, this has to be still in the secure coding part. Also, please note, you're as secure as your least secure asset, so you need to secure all the things. Probably not visible here, but here we have a very high gate, and then this. So again, back to our plan. After the secure coding come the internal audit and the external audit. And here we are going to go into a little bit more detail, a little bit more technical detail. I have here, to emulate an attack, you would usually use some sort of an attack vector. So the thing you could use ZAP, for example. Z attack proxy is what it stands for. It's created by OWASP. I'm going to talk about other alternatives in a little while. But what I've done here, why it's used, for example, if you need a login for a given system, you create a man-in-the-middle situation on your own PC, where you use the ZAP application as a proxy for your requests. So it collects all your cookies, and then it can use your cookies to actually crawl the whole site. Here you can see I've done a pen test actually of the OpenFest IT Bookshelf application. I don't like those guys, by the way. pretty weak on the security side, I would tell you. So here you push it against an application, and then it comes up with alerts. So for example, here, a cookie has been set without the HTTP-only flag, so you can access that cookie via JavaScript. So this is an open gate for cross-site scripting. Then you have, for example, the way your credentials are communicated, which is more or less the same. Whenever you post your credentials, it doesn't use the HTTP-only flag. And then you go ahead and take a look at all of those all of those issues, and this is really cheap, and you can do it yourself. If you do it yourself, you are doing some sort of information security already. What usually external penetration testers would do is not only use that, but they're going to go ahead and check for false positives in the reports. They're going to check your code, and they're going to come up with suggestions on how you can fix it. And this is the difference between an internal audit, where you have to find out a lot of the things yourself, and then paying actually for an external audit. Let me check what else we have. S2 setup here. Sorry, yeah. I've ran a OpenVAS is another open source application which deals with securing your own servers or environments, where you can start testing your servers for known vulnerabilities. For example, here I have actually I installed it only last night, so it found a critical vulnerability where I'm using the default admin credentials for that application. But it also found problems with my weak ciphers for SSL. And other issues, for example, here Pudo SSL version 2 controls CRC ciphers. And we can go into details, but I don't believe it would be as interesting as it should be. So right, this is the plan. We've covered some of the internal audits and some of the external audits. And let's talk about the tools that are good for testing. So first of all, you have the Wireshark. Wireshark you can use to monitor any network traffic. But it doesn't understand, so some of its weaknesses, it wouldn't understand HTTPS or any encrypted traffic, but it's going to show you the layer 2, layer 3 traffic and what's going on your network. How are requests coming in from where, etc., etc. And it would sniff, so it's really good at that. Z-proxy attack we've already seen. It's Java-based, so platform agnostic, which is good, and it really does a man-in-the-middle attack from your own PC. It can use WebSockets, and it's an OWASP tool, so it's safe to use. Burpsuit sits on top of, I would say, ZAP. And it also does a lot of other things, plus it has a lot of custom scripting in it. So for example, you can, as we talked about reconnaissance, you can collect email credentials from well-known leaks, and then you can try and log into application automated through Burpsuit. So Burpsuit is really good, and it's even better if you pay for it. So the commercial part is better yet, but Burpsuit, which is not commercial, is also usable. Then we have another OWASP tool, which is really getting better and better by the day. It's called the Not XSS Exploit Framework. So it's basically a framework, but it also supports 3 different browsers, which you rarely see with cross-site scripting frameworks. It supports Internet Explorer, it supports Chrome, and it supports Firefox. And it has, as it's a framework, it would wrap your code into the 3 browsers preferred way, so it can go undetected. It has a database of almost 5,000 exploits, and it's really easy to create a proof of concept code. for the leaks. Here we have some other non-free and non-open source alternatives for your consideration. Acunetics is probably one of the best. Then we have IBM App Scanner, Nexpose, Qualys, and Web Inspect by HP, which are enterprise level. I mean, I wouldn't use them, but you're free to choose. And last but not least, I usually go ahead whenever we deliver an application and go through this checklist. At least the minimum one, and then we have the full one. So what you should expect from a pen test and what you shouldn't. Results from the automated testing. So usually any pen test should have an automated part. For example, what I've shown with Zap. Then you would have analysis and validation of the automated test. So a human would go through the results and would analyze them and would check what's going on. Then you would have also, especially if you provided some code or some knowledge of the infrastructure, you would have manually developed vulnerabilities. By the way, I didn't mention that, and it's pretty important. Don't rely only on automated tests. Automated tests usually work with well-known configurations. So especially if you're writing custom code, you should really consider asking someone to test manually your site, and the automated tools are just a reference. And last but not least, a report with risk prioritization. And why risk prioritization is important? Because then you'll be able to have a leverage on the business people, and you'll be able to tell them, well, look, we have this vulnerability and that one, so please consider investing some sort of a budget into fixing those things. A good to have checklist here, risk scoring methodology, and benchmarking with other players in the industry. So for example, if you're a web company, you would start, and you deliver an application to a banking entity, then you need to adhere to the banking standards. System for risk management. This again is very important for the governance and how you invest, how much you're going to invest in fixing the issues. A secondary test after you fixed your vulnerabilities. Security awareness training, really important, especially if you'd like to cover the social aspect of pen testing. Spear phishing test of the team, which has to do with the security awareness training. You can do one before and one after the awareness training, just to measure how effective it has been. If you spear phish your team once, it's really easy to spear phish them a second time. Then you have social engineering. For example, you ask somebody to imposter as a support personnel. And then you have DDoS modeling. I think I have a few links on that. Vice is a really interesting magazine that deals with what's fresh in the world. Blame the kids. Yeah, DDoS tools are really, really easy to download. This one can crack into a lot of Internet of Things hardware, I would say, and you can use it to DDoS model your application and the response. So yeah, the last thing I would ask you is whether you're paranoid enough. If you're not, we can talk about it later. And with that, I'll ask you for any questions that you might have. You're welcome to shoot them.
All right. So as you already know from yesterday, this hall has 3 emergency microphones for questions, one in the bottom, one in the middle, and this one. So you can go on the red carpet behind one of the microphones, or just raise your hand and I'll come to you and you can ask a question.
I also have something for you. For each question asked, I'm going to show you some not sure if you follow this Twitter account. It's called Taylor Swift on security. So it has a lot of memes in there. So for each question, I'm going to show a meme. You can Google them afterwards. They're pretty funny, or at least information security funny.
Good. We have about 8 minutes for questions, so go on.
Hello. I have a question. It's about a malware who steals SSH key with combination with keylogger. Do you know such a malware for Linux? Because I already met for Windows, but I was not sure that there is for Linux.
Just let me check if I understand correctly. Where do you want to run that malware? Do you want to run it server side to collect all the passwords?
I want to run it on a workstation.
You want to run it on?
I want to steal a SSH key directly. I don't want to break it, actually. I want to steal it. I want even to have the pass for the encryption, the password.
There are a million ways you can do that. Yeah, usually I wouldn't give any advice on that because my job is actually to keep people safe and not leak. Thanks for the question. Anyway, we can discuss it later on. There are certain ways to do that, obviously, but the easiest way would be to actually own the whole host, which is SSHing to wherever, and have a keylogger there. So that's the most obvious way to do it. And there's a lot of malware out there to do that, but I wouldn't advertise. Next one.
So let's see the meme first. And Ljubo raised his hand.
So I saw a mention of POC on one of the slides.
Yeah.
So my question is it usually sufficient to show that there is a vulnerability or there is a well-known vulnerability, or do your clients want you to provide proof of code or actually to exploit that vulnerability?
Okay, I'm going to explain a little bit more. What we do is we build web software, so we test it ourselves. But we also built software for governance of information security vulnerabilities and so on and so forth. I can tell you we work with 5 of the largest companies dealing with NSA, CIA, etc. I can tell you what they do. We don't do it ourselves, that's what I mean. Depending on what you pay, because there are different packages, you either get somebody to check whether you have that vulnerability, or you get somebody to write a code exploiting that vulnerability. So because it has to do with more or less time, because usually a tester would check if it's working, and he'll have some sort of a very dirty piece of code, and if he needs to refine that, that's time and cost. So, for example, if you want someone to check whether your code is whether you have that vulnerability or not, that's, for example, 1 hour. But if you need a proof of concept, that's another 8 hours, which you can do the math yourself. $250 an hour or something like that.
Thank you.
And again, it really has to do with your budget and how compliant you need to be. For example, there are international PCI DSS, for example, for finance. You need to adhere to that. So usually, another thing, if you have more juniors than senior people on your team, and somebody says, well, we have a cross-site scripting vulnerability, and your team wouldn't understand what that is, then you need proof of concept as well.
A little abstract question. Is there a way, or do you think there will be a way to punish companies that do not think of security? Because if a company has hired a pen test company, then it already is thinking about its security. But there are hundreds out there that do not. And that includes not only websites, but also ISPs that, for example, allow DDoS to originate from them. So do you think of any ways of punishing the
legally, you mean? Or technically? Or because legally it's pretty easy. You have PCI DSS, you force everybody to be compliant with that. If you think that that's not enough, then you put in more controls in PCI DSS or other form of certification for whatever you need. For example, in healthcare, it's called HIPAA. And currently, those are, let's call them a joke. I mean, they are not sufficient. But if we are talking about giving a legal framework, then you need to have, customizing this, my answer to the guy who's asking. You need to have a team that looks into those things and thinks about that and makes the requirements more and more stringent as the threat levels rise. But I think the most important thing is to push that legislation into China, personally, because the Internet of Things is a joke as well, and not a funny one though. We need to have some more control over what's going out of there, and we need to have more security controls into hardware that is able to build DDoS monsters and so on and so forth. Did I answer your question, or if not, please?
Parts of it, yeah. But
okay, then ask the part that I didn't cover.
Well, for example, one thing that comes to my mind would be that Google might punish, if it has a checklist that it can automatically check, then it can punish websites that have lower security, or some other ways like that.
Yeah. Yeah, sure. And they do that. But that's not sufficient, because the guys that do the things that we want to be saved from, they don't care about their Google ranking, I think. They only care.
So, I mean, I not only count for the malicious actors, but also the ignorant and unsuspecting actors.
Yeah. If we talk about Google, and Google builds that into their search engine, then we have a very high cost. Then we are hiring the cost of being on top of Google. And then you get the corporations and enterprises that can have a information security team to be there on top. And this is a very good example, and on a very good topic. I don't know. We might need to think about that. It's a really good topic, and it might need a little more research, because again, it's pushing medium to small to medium business out of the game, basically, because ignorance is a huge problem. I agree with that, but we need to have another framework which isn't direct, which doesn't deal with direct competition somehow, I would say.
Thank you. It was an open question anyways.
Yeah, please consider, and if someone would answer it differently, please go ahead. Just a second so I can find the, my favorite one. Go ahead.
How do you do threat modeling for different clients? Because each one has different things that they need to be concerned with. And you don't want to save everyone from the NSA because this costs a lot of money and you're never really going to do it. So how do you choose what to invest time and resources in for specific clients?
Yeah, so different customers have different priorities. They keep different confidential data of different magnitude. So you need to speak their language, business-wise, and tell them, well, you can have like 5 bands of security. You can be very secure or very insecure. And the 2 extremes would cost you this much or that much. Like the one extreme would obviously cost you 0, but then you need to have the other 4 numbers. Yeah, and you could basically be out of business. And then you need to find a way to calculate that. First of all, you can do a preliminary, and most pen test companies do a preliminary scan, where they try to estimate how much work would go into finding most of the issues. And if you're very insecure, the cost goes on and on and on. So if you run a business that has an income of, let's say, $10,000 per month, you would want to try and somehow give the owner of that business a number to invest, be it in monthly fees or one-time fees or whatever, but you'd like to help them to their budget. And then you get into the mentality of who's interested in their information, and try to specifically guard the business from those watering holes. For example, if you run an online shop, e-commerce site or whatever, you try to fix your cross-site scripting, CSRF, etc., or any other ways that some guy would abuse your shop and your reputation would be ruined. But also you'd like to save your customers from that too. So usually it's a business question, and you need, as a pen tester, to be able to speak that language as well.
All right, so time is up. Let's thank Dimitar one more time.